Hey, ladies and gentlemen. So today we have a special treat. We have Obinna with us. He's going to be talking to us a little bit about some cool cloud technologies that you can apply when you're lifting and shifting your solutions to the cloud. I'm going to let him speak more on that. Obi is an enterprise architect, enterprise cloud architect. He's worked on tons of organizations. And take it away, Obi. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what we're going to be doing today and a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as Ed mentioned, my name is Obinna Igbokwe. I actually specialize in the Azure platform cloud section. So it's like, and then we're going to be focusing today on how we can take applications on-prem, move it to the cloud, and how we can leverage some of the capabilities that we're going to have in the cloud. So for example, if you have an on-prem application and you're thinking about moving to the cloud, what we're going to showcase today is a lot of benefits that come with moving to the cloud. So one of the platforms we're going to focus on today is Azure Functions. Azure Functions is a serverless PaaS solution that allows you to run APIs behind the scenes. And what we're going to focus on is to concentrate on the monitoring capabilities that come with Azure Functions, as well as some telemetry around Azure Functions. And the last thing we're going to focus on is how we can set up alerts to address things like CPU downtime or anytime we have any exceptions that come out from Azure. So I'm going to pass it back to Edward so he can actually tell me what use case is. Then we can walk through some examples in the cloud.
Okay,
Go
thanks,
ahead.
Obi. So, as you mentioned, Azure Functions are serverless APIs that you can build and deploy to Azure. And what I have here is a very simple Azure function that I've created. I'm going to run it in a second. And what this function does is basically an echo service. You send it a string, and then it responds back with a string. The issue I have is that this service should only be echoing um, names or textual messages. It should never echo numbers, specifically negative numbers or decimals or anything like that. And for those scenarios, where numbers are being echoed back or where a person passes in a number, I want to raise an exception. I want an alert sent out, so that people know that bad things are happening in the site. And the idea here is that it's going to emulate a real world scenario where some improper data is passed in or where some kind of fault condition has happened, and we want to basically be able to manage it using our DevOps process or something of that nature.
Yeah. So Edward, can we talk more about the how where this is going to reside in clouds, and we can walk through some of the actual resources in cloud that will be used, that will be enabled for this actual code that we're going to be pushing out?
Sure. The plan is to have this running as a either consumption plan or an app service plan, and it's basically going to be living inside of a resource group that's dedicated to just us running tests. I don't know if that answered your question. If you could be more
Yeah.
specific, I can.
Yeah, we actually we mentioned a couple of things. We talked about the app service plan, I mean container. We just want to understand in Azure what that means. So if you can just pull up Azure for us, and then we can just walk through what we understand as an app service plan and where we think that the app service function is going to live in.
Okay, so let's open up Azure right now, um, and here we have it. So basically, one of the key things that we're going to be doing is dumping. One of the key things that you do in Azure is you have to associate them resources with a resource group. So in
Right.
this case, the resource group we're going to be using is this resource group called Cloud Shell Storage East US. Really, it doesn't matter what name is used. It could be anything. And
I believe
so,
the
go
benefit.
ahead.
I believe the benefits of a resource group is to allow us to put all our resources in a logical manner, so we can actually focus on what we have in a specific resource group. And also one of the things that we should take note of is that resource group have a lot of benefits in terms of tagging to understand who has access to those resources in that group, as well as for cost center in case you're in a business and you want to be able to apply some costing against all your resources, you can actually take advantage of putting things in a resource group. So back to it.
Okay, so I have this service started now locally as of right now. And as you can see, the service basically uses a GET request, and which means we can load it into a browser. And where, we have a cool tool that OB is an evangelist for that you can use to do this testing. But for now, we're just going to keep it low tech and use the browser. And here's the URL for the Azure function that we're going to be deploying. So I can actually copy that and paste that in here, and it expects a name field, and I'm just going to type test. And when you run that, it says hello test, right?
And right now that's running locally, correct?
Yes, right now that's running locally on port 7071. And when you get the Azure function tools, you will be able to run these Azure functions locally as well.
Okay.
So you can pass any variable in here, and I'll just pass some more variables, right? But the problem exists, right, where I now want to limit the ability to pass numbers. Right now, numbers are allowed to be passed. So I'm going to stop the service, and I'm going to go into the Visual Studio, and I'm going to implement the capability to basically test for numbers. So to do that, I basically use a static function on int called try parse. Sorry.
And for those that are new to using C Sharp, trypass is basically a way of validating the actual object that's coming in to ensure that's an integer value in this case. And if it's not an integer value, to just bring out a boolean that says what is true or false, and you can go move forward. I don't know whether that's correctly stated, but
Yeah,
it can be
that's
after that.
about right. Okay, so here's what I've done. Everything remains essentially the same. As Obi mentioned, I've added this int.tryparse, which will evaluate any single string to see if that string is in fact a number. The great thing about tryparse is that it allows you to do two steps in one. Normally, if you just did a parse, so you tried to see if you could parse it just regular, if that string is not a number, it would throw an exception, right? In this case, we actually want the application to run normally if it's not a number. So when we use try parse and we basically pass in this wrong number, what try parse will do is that if it is a number, it will actually parse it and place the value of that number into this field wrong number. If it is not a number, then try parse will return false, and it will just continue through the evaluation. So let's test that out and see how it runs. Hopefully there are no errors in the code. So once again, we start the Azure function, and once again, the Azure function is loaded, okay? And this time around, I'm going to open up the fancy tool Postman, and I'm actually going to paste it in here and run it from here. So Obi, if you want to talk a little bit about Postman, give
Yes.
you a pitch.
Yeah, so Postman is basically a free tool. Is used to allow you to build collections of all the different types of request payloads or that you're going to send to a backend API is really geared around API functionality. You can actually share most of the collections, which are represented in folders and files, and that can be shared amongst your team members. So it's a very good collaboration tool if you are a team and when you're trying to share different APIs across different team members. They also have the concept of workspaces, which allows you to segregate your projects by workspaces. And that allows you to also share your workspaces amongst different project teams so you can keep everything nice and neat. As you can see, the way Edward has it, it actually collaborates or categorizes things in certain areas. So it has a nice photo representation of the different types of projects in this case that you're working on, and it keeps everything nice and neat.
Okay, so we've set this up, and it's basically the same URL that we used in the past. And we're using name, and we're passing in test. And if we run this, it should return hello test. And you can see over here on the right that as I run the Postman test, the results show up over here on the right. Right, so let me just try using something different so you can see. Right, and as you can see, I passed in Norman, and over here, you can see echo has started, Norman, echo has ended, right?
And some of the additional information that's appearing in those line items, is that because you have a log turned on to capture some of the data that's coming through the API?
Yes, so that's the other thing that I'm doing in here. If you look at the code base, I'm actually logging the start, then I'm reading the value, then I'm logging the name, right, which is Norman, both to information and trace, and then I'm logging when the function has ended. And if you look in here at what's happening, you can see echo has started, then the name Norman, echo has ended, and then some additional information that's at the runtime level that they've added to just say that the function executed successfully.
Yeah, and the ILogger that I noticed there is actually one of the features that's built into an Azure function, correct?
Yes, ILogger is built into not just Azure Functions, but to a lesser extent, or to a greater extent, or maybe even an equal extent, web APIs in general, which allow you to basically use dependency injection to add logging capabilities and configuration file reading capabilities to your applications very, very transparently. So this is not, I'm not using any kind of specific function signature here. There's no such, it's not like I'm extending a base class called runner or whatever. All I have to do is add an argument called ILogger as one of the parameters to this function that I create, and it will actually pass in the log information into it. It's actually quite neat the way it works.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and let's now do that error condition. So I've been passing in real names. So now let's pass in a number and run this. And so now you see over here that when I pass in a number, I get a 500 internal server error, right? And if I go over here, you see it started executing, it reads the number, it logged the number that was passed, and now I've gotten some errors that say that something bad happened. As a matter of fact, the exception that's being raised over here says, terrible exception, you can't pass 567 here, right? So this sort of covers both scenarios that we're looking for. So we're now going to attempt to publish this onto Azure Functions, onto Azure.